Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Underwater Updates. Today we're going to talk about some tips and tricks on how to help your Amazon Frogbit and other floating plants grow and flourish. Alright, so this is my 15-gallon column aquarium, as you guys have seen probably in my other videos many times. I put Amazon Frogbit up here in the top, and as I'm sure you can tell that there's also some duckweed up there as well. I mostly just did that to give it some cover. The betta really enjoys having the cover up there. He likes the shade, and it's actually encouraged some of the other fish to kind of come swim up underneath, which is just cool. It adds a different dynamic and gets some of those fish that usually tend to hang out in the bottom of the tank to kind of come up and use the entire tank. And it just overall makes the column tank look better, because with tall tanks like this, it's nice to have them full of plants, fish, just everything all the way up. That's kind of what makes them look great. But anyway, back to the plants. So Amazon Frogbit is these bigger leaved plants that you see here. You can check a video, one of my other videos up here, click that little button to learn how to take care of Amazon Frogbit outright, but I'm just going to give you some tips and tricks that I have found to be helpful in the couple months that I've had this plant. So first, a little background knowledge on floating plants themselves. Floating plants get all of their nutrients through their root systems from the water column. So you need to make sure that you have a nutrient-rich water column, because they're not going to be able to get any nutrients from your substrate like all the other kinds of plants that belong in aquariums. The ones that, you know, send their roots down in and pretty much behave like normal plants, both aquatic and non-aquatic. But these plants, their roots are their main source of nutrients. So make sure you have a really enriched water column with plenty of nutrients. You won't need to worry about any kind of CO2 going through your tank with floating plants, because since they are floating, they can just get their CO2 from the air. I have noticed that Amazon Frogbit is a very, very delicate and temperamental plant when it comes to surface agitation. So as you can see, I've taken a bit of airline tubing right here, sealed off the ends, and hung it with a Christmas ornament hanger. It's kind of a do-it-yourself way to stop the filter from really making the surface of the water too turbulent, but still allowing a little bit of surface agitation for the gas exchange. So Amazon Frogbit, just like the duckweed that's also in here, is a really, really, really fast growing and propagating plant. So it's a great plant for beginners in the hobby, intermediate, expert. I mean, everybody enjoys floating plants, to be quite honest. But for beginners especially, it's a very forgiving plant. If you start to, you know, have some issues with your water quality, your water's not as nutrient rich as it should be, and they start to actually rot and die off, it's not going to be a huge deal, because you can really fill up an entire tank with duckweed or frogbit in just a matter of weeks, days, once you get your nutrients back and you kind of figure out what your issue was. It's a great forgiving plant. Alright, so the second tip, so the first tip was to use some airline tubing to slow down the surface agitation. My second tip is going to be to fertilize your water. Dosing heavily with nutrients, now that I have a significantly amount more plants, is going to be the first way to make sure that your Amazon Frogbit stays green. I noticed it started to go brown and rot, kind of similar to that leaf right there. That started happening to all these large leaves of Amazon Frogbit that I have, and I noticed it was because that there just wasn't enough nutrients. I was dosing with this Leaf Zone by API. It's the only one I've ever used, so I can't really give you guys anything to compare it to, but what it does say is that it says that you need to dose weekly, and with the addition of these floating plants and all the other plants, I dose daily. So I don't know if that is just because of the quality of the product itself or just because of the excess of plants that I have. But I dose daily, which you do need to watch with, because dosing daily can really spike your algae issues, which is never great. But I make sure to watch it, make sure that I don't have too bad of algae. If I do have algae, I scrape it off, do a nice water change. Nutrients lacking in your water column are going to affect your floating plants first, just because that's where they get all their nutrients from. You won't notice the decay in your stemmed plants, in your other rooted plants as quickly as you will notice the decay in the top of the floating plant. So that is a really, really, really good indicator that you need to start dosing with some kind of fertilizer or some kind of nutrients if you notice your floating plant starting to wither. And now my last tip before I let you guys go is let your Amazon Frogbit propagate on its own. If you can see underneath right there, you can see the runner going out from this plant. There's the runner right there going out to this one. Now, a lot of people are tempted, and I used to do the same thing, a lot of people are tempted to just kind of snip that and create two plants and let this new plant grow on its own. But I've found that they tend to survive a lot longer and stay a lot greener and grow a lot bigger when you keep them together. And I'm not sure if that's just because they're still connected and it doesn't have to be independent, or what I'm thinking is that it actually creates more of a stable plant so it doesn't get, you know, thrown around by the surface agitation. It doesn't get sucked under. It doesn't get basically wet on top as easily when it's kept in a tight-knit bunch instead of just like a small little two-leaf system floating around by itself that can easily just get sucked under the falling water if it were to slip underneath there. So yeah, to recap, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you've figured out a way, if you do have a hang on the back filter, to slow down the surface agitation. Definitely going to want to make sure to fertilize your water column if you notice any kind of browning or decay. If you already have a nutrient-rich substrate that's going to leak into your water column, then you probably are fine when it comes to dosing into your actual water column. But I just have a normal gravel substrate. I never really intended on going with the planted aquarium route. So not only do I have the root tabs underneath there, but I also use the liquid fertilizer that I just showed. And then my final and last tip is to leave them together as long as they can. Just let them self-propagate. Let them slip their own runners, or snip their own runners, excuse me. Just let their runners break naturally, and just try and do as little, I know it's hard, but try and do as little propagating as you can just to let your plants really grow and flourish. You don't want to stunt anything. You don't want to interrupt the process. Just let them grow, let them really mature, and then once they get big enough, if you really need to propagate it, go for it. But most of the time, it's just going to do it on its own, and it's going to be more beneficial, and you're going to like the way that it looks. So those are my tips and tricks for Amazon Frogbit and kind of floating plants in general. If you have any questions, leave some comments down below. Like this picture, like this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe for similar content, and remember to always stay updated. Thank you.